Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Serhat Dogan's poetry collection, Heart. For full disclosure, Serhat asked me to read this book and to do a review of it. I don't know if he was intending for me to do a video review necessarily, but here we are. He found me through a social media site, and so if he had looked at my profile, which I assume is why he decided to ask me, he will know that I do video reviews. So this is what it is. So, Heart. This is a self-published collection. For those of you who may be creative writing snobs, yes, that means what you think it means. The poems in this collection are an interesting seed that could potentially become fully developed poems, but they're really not there yet. So, a big problem with the writing in this collection is that while the poems tend to be evocative of experiences, and that's really what the collection is meant to do, is to sort of explore experiences, explore emotional experiences, things like this. The big problem is that they kind of get to the level of here's the evocative moment, but they don't really develop it. So there's a couple of them that I thought were better than the average poem in this collection. I'm going to read you those couple of poems. They're things that move toward doing the kinds of things poetry should be doing, which is using imagery, using description, using sensory elements in order to create an experience for the reader. What these poems tend to get to the level, and this is actually a very common thing for emerging writers, they tend to get to the level of, I have had this experience that was very meaningful to me, therefore it is inherently meaningful as such. But they don't tend to get beyond that to a deeper, more engaging, sort of human element. But these are some of the poems that I thought were better. Okay, so this first one I'm going to read you is called Stories of One. Also, by the way, there's a lot of grammar and mechanics issues with these poems. I'm going to read them as close as I can to how they're actually written, which is why there will be some grammar and mechanics awkwardness. So this is Stories of One. Bartender sat next to me. He told his story. I told mine. Drinks poured to words. It filled stories. We were two different humans, but our stories found a way in one dark pit. This is kind of interesting, right? This idea of building connections with strangers through storytelling and presumably through these sort of shared experiences, given the content of the rest of the collection, which is largely about sort of suffering, love, and self-discovery. My guess would be that those are the kinds of stories being shared between the bartender and the poet persona here. But we don't get that developed, right? We don't have much going on there, right? We get the element of storytelling and making a connection with this bartender, but that's it. We don't know what the stories are about. We don't know why the connection matters. We don't know what really is meant by dark pit, the last line, because there's nothing in the... So it's an 8-line poem. There's nothing in the first 7 lines that's particularly dark or sad or ominous or concerning in any way. But that last line, dark pit, takes us to this negative place. And it's not really clear what that means. So again, these are the kinds of things that you'd really want to develop to make this a stronger poem, I think. Another one that I kind of like, this is it's not great again, but it's interesting. There's interesting ideas in a lot of these. So this one is Love. It has been years, but I still remember you, and whenever I think about you, a melody begins to play. It's kind of interesting. It's moving towards some sort of sensory description, hearing a melody in one's mind. It's getting there. It could go further. It could develop this more. But it's better than many of them. Another one I'm going to read you, and then I'm going to talk about a whole sort of category of them. Another one I'm going to read you, kind of one that I like. This is on the border between the next category. I'm on the border with the next category I'm going to talk about, which is very short poems, which are endemic throughout this collection. So this is called Kindly Liar. Your eyes and your mouth are telling different stories. I like it. It's kind of, it's pithy. There's not much to it. I think it could definitely be stronger, but it's pithy. But again, this is one of the things that we get throughout the collection is these very, very short poems, often 2-line poems. So I'm gonna read you a few of these. So this first one is actually 3 lines. It's called Choice of Mistakes. My mistakes choose loneliness, and I had to fit it. Another very short one called Fact. 2 lines. No one can defeat me as good as I do. Another 2-line one, Home. I found home. It's not a building. It's a laugh. The thing is with these very short poems, this is really what I'm talking about when I say these feel like the sort of early career writer's approach in which, because I have experienced something and it has had a profound impact on me, it is therefore in itself profound. It's therefore in itself worthy of poetry. And the problem is we as readers have not necessarily had that same experience. We don't have the same memory, the same psychological reference point that you have for your experience. Now, we may have had similar experiences, and we can project those onto the poem that you've written, but then that's really us doing the work of the poem, rather than the poem doing its own work, rather than it saying, here is what you should know about the world, or here's the important thing. It does really become, I, the reader, have to substitute in my own experience rather than the poem working as a poem. So that's actually a really, really big problem. Again, it's a very common problem for emerging writers, but it's something that people who stick with it, and particularly people who either sort of get help from peers or from creative writing instructors, or who have useful critics who are willing to give them concrete recommendations, things like that. People tend to grow out of this as poets. Hopefully that will happen in this case. So the last one I'm going to read you, I actually really like the sentiment of this. I like the idea of it. Um, but there's a big caveat on this. So this is Your Eyes. And this is actually maybe my favorite poem of the collection if I were going to pick one. Your eyes are like warm memory of my childhood. Now, the reason I put a caveat on this, I like it. I like it. I think it's a good image. I think it's a good simile. The caveat to it. The caveat basically, I think it was Samuel Johnson who once wrote in response to a manuscript that someone had sent him asking for feedback. The parts that are original are not good, and the parts that are good are not original. This poem is basically a slight reworking of Guns N' Roses.